Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about this idea of 6-0 technology and how it's supposed to be a way to handle some really big global problems. It's a pretty complex topic, so let's get right into it. We're looking at an excerpt from a concept presentation, from Dr. AKM Hai.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and the title's a mouthful. It's called Implementing Technology of 6-0 Initiating Economy of Net Zero, Sustainable Development Insperity, Achieving Peace and Prosperity.
Yeah, so a big picture kind of thing.
Definitely big picture.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting stuff, I think, once we unpack it.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear more. What struck me was that he doesn't just lay out this kind of utopian, perfect world idea. He gives a real plan for how we could get there.
Right, exactly. And he's backing it up with actual research, and he connects it to things that are, globally recognized, like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
So it's not just pie in the sky thinking.
No, not at all. So at the core of his vision is this thing called the 6-0 framework. It's this idea that we should aim for zero emissions, zero waste, zero poverty, zero hunger, zero illiteracy, and zero inequality.
Zero everything, huh? Sounds pretty ambitious.
Yeah, I know. When I first heard it, I thought, zero everything. Is that even possible? It sounded almost too good to be true.
I get that. It's easy to be cynical, but what makes this different is that he doesn't dwell on the problems. He really focuses on the solutions. It's less about this is wrong and more about here's where we go and here's how we get there.
Like that, a solutions-oriented approach. Right. So let's break down these zeros one by one, starting with zero emissions. We all know climate change is a big deal, but how does he think we can actually hit zero emissions? Like, what are the steps?
He's got this multi-pronged approach. First, a huge shift away from things like, fossil fuels, going towards renewable energy, solar, wind, hydroelectric, all of those. And it's not just about you and me changing our light bulbs. It's about, like, a complete overhaul of how we get our energy.
That's a big change.
Hmm.
Makes you wonder if our systems are even ready for that kind of shift.
Well, that's where technology comes in, right?
Yeah.
He talks a lot about needing to invest in research and development to make renewable energy better, more efficient, cheaper, and easier for everyone to access. It's like he sees a future where clean energy isn't just for rich people, it's a right for everyone.
That's a great point. So switching to renewables is part of it. What about using energy more efficiently? Does that factor in?
Definitely. He's big on that. He says that using less energy is just as important as switching to cleaner sources. It's like you wouldn't leave all the lights on in your house when you're not in a room, right? It's common sense. But we need to apply that same thinking to our industries, transportation, even our homes. We got to be smarter.
It's that simple reduce, reuse, recycle idea, but applied on a grander scale.
Yeah, exactly. It's a two-pronged approach. Cleaner sources, less overall use. What about capturing the carbon that's already out there? Is that part of this?
He does mention carbon capture and storage.
CCS, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he thinks it could be a big part of reaching net zero. It's still pretty new. But the idea is to grab that carbon from, say, factories and stuff and store it underground so it doesn't mess with the atmosphere.
It's kind of like cleaning up the mess we already made. Okay, what's next?
Let's move on to zero waste. Now, I try to be mindful of my trash and everything, but it feels like a losing battle sometimes. How do we even get to zero waste on a global level? It seems impossible.
He's really into this idea called the circular economy. It's kind of like flipping the script on how we do things now.
How so?
Well, we usually just take resources, make stuff, and then throw it away. But imagine if everything was constantly reused, like in nature. One thing's waste becomes another's resource. A closed loop system.
So it's about designing things that last longer, that can be easily recycled, things like that.
Exactly. It's closing the loop so waste isn't a problem. It's just, part of the process. And it means we need to change not just the technology, but our whole mindset as consumers.
So it's not just on the companies, it's on us too, right?
Definitely a shared responsibility. We need to be more aware of what we're buying and using, while companies need to design things with sustainability in mind from the start. Imagine a system where waste basically doesn't exist. That's the goal.
Now, that's a bold vision. It makes you think about the things we buy in a whole new way.
It does, and I think that's what's so exciting about Dr. Hai's work. He's not afraid to challenge the status quo and propose radical solutions.
Okay, so we've talked about zero emissions and zero waste. Let's move on to the third zero. Zero poverty. Now, this one feels especially daunting, right? How can we possibly eliminate poverty completely? It seems like such a complex issue tied to so many factors.
Yeah, no doubt. But his perspective is interesting. He thinks we need to shift from just managing poverty to actually getting rid of it completely.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is. And he believes we can do it by creating fair economic opportunities for everyone and making sure resources are distributed fairly. He sees sustainable economic growth, the kind that doesn't trash the planet as a key part of this, along with social safety nets so people don't fall through the cracks.
So it's about creating a world where everyone have the opportunity to not just survive, but actually thrive. It's about leveling the playing field and making sure the benefits of economic growth reach everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. And that ties into what he says about education and access to resources. If people have the knowledge and skills they need to succeed, and they have access to things like healthcare and clean water, he thinks we can break the cycle of poverty and build a more just society.
So it's not just about handouts, it's about empowering people to help themselves.
Exactly. It's about investing in people,
Yeah.
giving everyone the chance to contribute and do well, regardless of where they come from.
It's a powerful idea, but it's a long road to get there. Okay, let's move on to zero hunger. This one seems very connected to zero poverty. It's hard to imagine a world without hunger when so many people are struggling just to meet their basic needs. What's Dr. Hai's take on this?
He talks a lot about sustainable agriculture. And when he says sustainable, he's not just talking about organic farming or using less pesticides. He's talking about a total transformation of how we grow food and how it gets to people.
So it's about more than just growing more food. It's about growing it in a way that's good for the environment, fair to workers, and makes economic sense.
You got it. And technology is a big part of that. He talks about things like precision agriculture, which uses tech like GPS and data to help farmers get the most out of their land while minimizing environmental impact. He also says we need to invest in infrastructure, things like better transportation and storage, to reduce food waste and make sure food gets to the people who need it most.
So it's about attacking the problem from all angles, not just trying to put a Band-Aid on it.
Right. And it ties back into that circular economy idea we talked about earlier. He wants a future where food waste is basically eliminated, resources are used carefully, and everyone has access to good, affordable food.
A world without hunger. That's a powerful goal. Let's move on to zero illiteracy. I think we all agree that education is super important, but what's Dr. Hai's specific approach to achieving universal literacy?
He's really into the idea of using technology to reach people who don't have access to traditional education.
Yeah.
Things like online learning platforms, mobile classrooms, stuff like that. But he's not just talking about access, he's talking about quality too.
So it's not just about getting everyone online, it's about making sure everyone has access to good quality education. And not just basic reading and writing, but the kind of skills people need to succeed in today's world.
Exactly. And he sees this as a key to empowering people and breaking the cycle of poverty.
Okay, last but certainly not least, let's talk about zero inequality. This is a tough one, right? It's such a big issue with so many layers. How does Dr. Hai even begin to approach this?
He's big on policies that guarantee equal opportunities for everyone, no matter your gender, race, religion, anything like that. And he talks about enforcing anti-discrimination laws and making sure everyone can access good health care, education, and jobs. Basically, it's about making sure everyone has a fair shot at success.
So it's about removing the systemic barriers that prevent people from achieving their full potential. It's about creating a world where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their differences.
Exactly. And he's got a point when he says inequality isn't just a moral issue, it's an economic one too. If everyone has a chance to contribute, that's better for everyone in the long run.
It's interesting how he ties these social goals back to his whole idea of sustainable development. It's like he's saying we can't have true sustainability without also addressing things like poverty and inequality.
Yeah, he's really big on that. He sees these social goals as totally intertwined with his vision for a sustainable future. He wants a world where everyone can not only survive, but thrive. And he sees technology as a big part of making that happen.
It's a really powerful message. But it makes me wonder, how does all this connect to his concept of a net zero economy? That's a term that's been popping up more and more lately.
Yeah, and it's a key part of bringing this whole 6-0 vision to life. A net zero economy means the amount of greenhouse gases we're putting into the atmosphere is balanced out by the amount we're taking out, like a state of equilibrium.
So it's not just about cutting emissions, it's about achieving a kind of balance.
Yeah,
That seems pretty hard to do given how much we rely on fossil fuels.
totally. It's a huge shift in how we do things, like a complete transformation.
So where do we even start? What are the key strategies to hit this net zero goal? What specific actions is Dr. Hai talking about?
Okay, so the first thing is decarbonizing our energy systems. Basically, getting rid of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas and switching to renewables.
Okay, yeah, we touched on that earlier.
Right, but it's huge GE for a net zero economy. We need to drastically cut our use of fossil fuels and go all in on clean energy. And it's not just about, sticking solar panels everywhere. It's rethinking the whole system, how we make electricity, how it gets to people, how we use it in our homes and businesses, everything.
So a complete systemic change.
Yeah. And then there's energy efficiency, using less energy to do the same things. Think of it like tightening your belt, but for energy use.
Okay, got it. So we've got renewable energy and using less energy overall. What else is in his plan?
Well, he talks about electrifying our transportation systems. Imagine all our cars, buses, trains, even planes running on electricity instead of gas.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about things that are hard to electrify, like, airplanes or heavy industry?
Mhm.
Are there solutions for those too?
That's where things like carbon capture and storage, CCS, come in. We talked about it earlier, right? But it's important for net zero, too. If we can grab those emissions from hard-to-change industries, it helps keep that balance we're aiming for.
So it's a whole bunch of things working together. Technology, changing how we do things, a real mix.
Absolutely. And it's not just about tech, it's about policy, too. He's a big believer in governments creating incentives to make all these clean technologies happen.
So using policy to reward good behavior and discourage the bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like those carbon pricing mechanisms, things like carbon taxes or cap and trade systems.
Mm.
Basically, they make it more expensive to pollute. So businesses are encouraged to clean up their act.
Okay, I can see how that would push things in the right direction.
Right. It levels the playing field, making clean technologies more competitive with fossil fuels.
Makes sense. So we've got renewable energy, using less energy, electric transportation, carbon capture, and those policy incentives. Is that it, or is there more to the puzzle?
Well, he really stresses research and development, or R&D. He thinks we got to keep investing in research to find new and better ways to be sustainable.
So pushing the boundaries of what's possible, coming up with even better solutions.
Exactly. And he's thinking big picture stuff, next-gen solar tech, better batteries, even things like fusion energy. He's convinced that investing in R&D will unlock a truly sustainable future.
That's a lot to take in. Are there any countries out there that are already doing this, making real progress towards a net zero economy?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sweden, for example, they've got this carbon tax, and they've really gone all in on renewable energy. They're aiming to be totally net zero by 2045. They're a leader in this whole sustainability thing.
That's pretty impressive. What about the European Union? They've been making a lot of noise about their Green Deal. Does that fit into this whole net zero thing?
Totally. The EU's Green Deal is this massive plan to basically make their whole economy sustainable. It's got all sorts of things in it, investing in renewables, energy efficiency, sustainable farming, protecting nature, you name it.
So a really holistic approach,
Yeah.
tackling all aspects of sustainability.
Yeah, it's ambitious, but it shows that they're serious about this.
Okay, this is all great, but I'm curious about the people side of this transition. How will all this impact people's lives, especially those who are already struggling?
Well, that's where Dr. Hai's idea of sustainable development insperity comes in. He wants a world that's not just environmentally sustainable, but also economically prosperous and fair to everyone.
Sustainable development insperity, that's quite a mouthful. What does it actually mean?
It's recognizing that sustainability isn't just about saving the planet, it's about people. It's making sure everyone has access to clean water, healthy food, good education, decent work, and living in communities that can withstand the challenges that are coming our way.
So it's about creating a world that's good for both the environment and people.
Exactly. And he thinks to do this, we have to change how we think. We can't see economic growth and protecting the environment as two separate things. They have to go hand in hand.
So redefining what it means to be prosperous.
Right. True prosperity means we're doing well environmentally and socially, not just economically.
I like that. And it makes sustainability sound more like an opportunity than a sacrifice.
That's a good way to put it. It's an opportunity to create a better world for everyone.
But that leads to the question, how do we get there? How do we turn these big ideas into real, tangible actions?
That's where his strategic initiatives come in. And he believes that public-private partnerships are going to be key.
Public-private partnerships. That sounds interesting. But I think we need to take a break here and let all of this sink in for a bit.
It's like, instead of governments and businesses each doing their own thing, they team up to tackle these big problems.
Makes sense. Combining their strengths.
Yeah, governments can do things like, provide funding, offer incentives, set policies that encourage sustainability. And businesses, well, they're good at, being innovative, finding ways to scale things up, getting things to market.
Yeah, they each bring something to the table.
Right. Together, they can achieve a lot more. Makes you wonder why this isn't happening more already, right?
That's what I was thinking. What's holding these partnerships back?